Before we begin, please be advised that this show may contain some adult themes that may not be appropriate for all listeners. Use your discretion. Now, on to our show. Welcome to the Sip Saga Society, where we cover histories, mysteries, and just any story worth telling. My name is Karina, and I am your host. And joining us today, we have the whole crew. Everyone's here. I'm very excited. We have Greg,
Hey,
Christina,
Hello.
and Randy.
Hiya.
It's been a weird week, guys. But, the best thing about life is that we get to drink beverages along the way. All right. So, Christina, what are you sipping today?
My tried and true. Not that I need it, but my good home Dr. Pepper. Randy.
All right, Randy, do you also have Dr. Pepper? This is an important question.
She does.
Yeah, just got it. Just got a refill.
I feel left out
I'm
because I don't have
dangerous
Dr.
when I
Pepper.
have it in my house. Ugh.
Same. Same, same.
I wish I still drink Dr. Pepper. I like that was the soda that kept me drinking sodas a lot, and so I cut it out like a long time ago,
No,
and I
I
did,
get it.
that's like the slippery slope for me.
If I didn't drink Dr. Pepper, I would not drink any soda except maybe ginger ale. I could see myself like occasionally having a ginger ale.
My one weakness still is Baja Blast from Taco Bell.
Same. I
That's the
always
one that
get
I
it.
allow.
I don't get it. I'm not the Baja Blast. It reminds me of Mountain Dew. But
It is of a very similar nature, I think.
hmm
All right, Christina, was that all your beverages? What else
That
do you
is
have?
all that I have. I should be drinking water, but
That's what Randy said earlier.
did you?
She said, I'm dehydrated. I should be drinking water. Oh, Randy does have water, everyone.
I
She
drank
was
water earlier, but I should be drinking water consistently. I should put it that way.
All right, Greg, what are you sipping?
I brought water, because I also wanted to stay hydrated, but I have one of those like cocktail in a cans, like the Negroni, because I like that one. And my beer is the Florida Man double IPA. Has this kind of. I just
Oh,
thought the
that's cute.
floor. I
I
thought the
love the
Florida Man was
aesthetics.
funny too.
I was really hoping that when you showed the can, it was going to be something crazier with that name.
No,
I
it's like
know.
way
I
more
wanted
chill,
like
but it's way more chill, but it's cool. It's like an alligator on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wanted a guy wrestling an alligator. I think that's what I was looking for.
that would be
hmm
cool.
I needed more alligator energy. I went back to Sprouts and I have another tractor beverage. I party hard, guys, but I've been trying to drink less alcohol this year. My body said no, and I agree. Okay, so this year, or this episode, we're focusing on the year 1680. So both of our stories will cover something that happened that year. Our big story every week will typically cover some sort of American history for the following year, but our short story does not necessarily have to follow American history. It's just something that happened in that year. So my story comes from France, and we're going to talk about a lady who was born Catherine de Shays in the year 1640. Brandy, why are you laughing?
I'm so sorry. I just loved the way you said France.
Okay.
You
I was
absolutely killed me. I was telling Sage, I was trying to do it nicely off off the recording.
No, you look like you were having a good time and I wanted to be involved. Okay. So, poor Catherine, born in 1640. It was a hard year, guys. And she had a hard upbringing and by the age of 9 had mastered the art of fortune telling in the streets. She had made quite the name for herself and eventually married or had a big loyal following. And at 20 years old, she married Antoine Montvoisin, and he was a merchant. But he was also very incompetent and a heavy drinker. And that's where all the money went. Catherine was now responsible not only to keep herself alive, but also her husband and their children. And she was not wanting to go back to the streets. So she decided, we gotta hustle. And she went back to what she already knew, the fortune telling. But now she was an adult woman, so she's like, I gotta expand my business. And she was a very good businesswoman. She eventually became a midwife, a beautician, an herbalist, and served the elite circles of French aristocracy. That word gives me trouble every time. You can only tell fortunes for so long before you make the church mad. And in 1666, she was taken to the Tribunal of Priests and Theology, professors at Sorbonne. There's a better way to say that, but I don't know how to do it.
think
Sorbonne
I
University.
think it's the Sorbonne.
Okay, you can say it like Greg
Actually,
does.
no. I like one thing I can come in with is I know that word.
It sounds
Greg, I
like
know
beef
that one.
That's it. I know that
bourguignon.
word.
I was raised in Arkansas. I'm from the
It sounds
South.
so fancy, Greg.
I know, Greg. And this is how you actually say
I only know a little bit of French, but it's enough to be like dangerous with
it.
that language. So
I should send this to my French teacher from high school or junior high. Anyway, she's probably like, you learn nothing. Yep. So, Catherine, I'm just gonna call her Catherine for most of this. If you want to Google her, please be advised, she has a lot of very dark history and she did a lot of terrible things. But she typically goes by La Voisin. I don't like to say it consistently because it's too much for me. And her name is also Catherine, so we can go by that. But okay, so there she is at the fancy university. And the tribunal of priests and theology professors are like asking her all these questions. And eventually she's able to convince them that her gifts were given to her by God. So the church is basically like, "Yep, God gave her this power." So now her business is really booming because it's like she's got the seal of approval from the church. She can just go. And so Catherine was a woman who was here to provide for her customers. And they kept asking her for just really simple things. They just wanted their fortunes to completely change. And she wanted her help in making it happen. And women often approached her with similar requests. They wanted people to fall in love with them, or they wanted someone to die so they could inherit all their stuff, or they wanted someone to die so they could go with that guy that they were already in love with. So Catherine started asking them, started sending them to different churches, would give them a prayer to pray to a saint, and then they were like, "No, we need more change, Catherine. We need more." So she started giving them amulets, and then she was like, "Let's just do some magic things." And also, she's already like, the church said it's fine, so you can do whatever. So quickly, Catherine escalated to human sacrifice and poisonings, as well as dark rituals to help the church change the fate of her clients.
Am I the only one that felt like that came out of nowhere?
Yes,
we
yes.
went from like bless you to like let's murder people and
Yeah, she
drink
went
their
real
blood.
fast because we needed change. I don't know. I don't know what necessarily happened. I don't know what magic Catherine found, but she also, throughout all this time, she was still married, but had a lot of different lovers that were part of this dark magic scene. And a lot of the poisoners were also in that sphere, the fortune tellers. Like, this is a community she's been growing up with. And I also feel like this is a more superstitious time, so I could see it easily going from like, where the real power is. Leave the saints behind. Human sacrifice is where it's at. Like, I could see it happen. I'm just clarifying, I don't agree with human sacrifice, but this lady did. So eventually, the Paris chief of police had become concerned about the poisonings. Oh, she also did abortions, the witchcraft, and the dark rituals. They didn't like it. And also, rich, wealthy men just kept dying. That was not good. And King Louis XIV was increasingly terrified that he would be poisoned. And people were getting poisoned, like people were dying. This was a real threat. And he started having his servants taste test his meals. Through various finger pointing and rivalry, Marie Bosse, a French poisoner, another one, pointed the finger at Catherine in an event known as the Affair of the Poisonings. Catherine was arrested on March 12th, 1679, after attending Mass. So she would go to Mass and then later at night go have these black masses and like kill somebody. Like we know she killed people. And this is like separate from the poisonings that she's already an accomplice to. Anywho, so yeah, another poisoner was like, Catherine's the problem. And she gets taken right after Mass to a fortress where she was questioned. They searched her home. They found magic powders, potions, sacrilegious objects, black magic. I don't know what that means, but it was in one of the resources. And I was like, what do you mean? It's just like a jar? This is where I keep it. And a list of all her clients. She also would give them receipts. So she was like, here's an active paper trail, guys. The church said it's okay. Yeah, and one of her clients was the mistress of the king, the Marquise de Montespan. Montespan? She's a big deal. Like she was one of the, I think she was a very beautiful mistress of his, and I've heard her name a lot, as well as a lot of other members of the royal court on that list. She really was accommodating to the upper class of the French court. So it was believed that Madame Montespan had procured love potions from Catherine to get the king to fall in love with her because she wanted him to ignore his other pregnant mistress and also ignore his wife, I guess, and only focus on her. She also participated in multiple dark rituals, and that also included human sacrifice, and was suspected to have poison powder in her use to, like in her possession, to use on the king's new lover or on the king himself. They didn't know. They just knew that she had poison for somebody. This was not good for Catherine. And so they decided to burn her at the stake to set an example to the other fortune tellers and the necromancers in Paris. Like, we will kill you. They believe she helped poison over 1,000 people in Paris.
Wait, what happened to the mistress?
I will get to that. I'm gonna tell you about her
Okay, thank
first.
you. I was like, goodness gracious, you're telling me all of these things the mistress had, and then she's the one in trouble. It's just, okay, good.
Okay, but Catherine gave her those things.
Yeah, I
She,
would like them to be dressed down together.
they won't. Only Catherine will have any consequences. But also, she did poison over 1,000 people and had 2,500 human sacrifices. Catherine was burned at the stake on February 22nd, 1680. Spectators report she tried to kick the burning hay away from her and shouted about how innocent she was before she was quickly engulfed in flames. And that's how she died. I really like this story because I love the story of someone who hurts people and kills people, having consequences to their actions. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Anyway, so the king received the Marquess's confession. And if he acknowledged her role in the black magic, it would look bad for him. Because you can't say that people in your court want to kill you. That's not great. He was worried that if people knew the truth, that everyone in the court was trying to kill him, the peasants would rebel, or England would fight out and take an opportunity to attack. Very valid reasons. Ultimately, she just was moved out of the palace and died in May of 1707. They just slowly stopped talking to her and they iced her out. And then he would still go visit her rooms, but he just would never be alone with her. I mean, I probably would just kick her out, but that's just me. But he didn't want to make it too obvious, so he just slowly moved her out to the country.
That's got to be damaging to him, right? If that information were to come out that his mistress was doing all of this.
I
I feel
feel like
like
that kind of stuff was open secrets, you know? Like there's so many rumors from that time of like the scandalous stuff people did that it's like I feel like it was kind of common knowledge.
I would assume so. I feel like someone has to know because wouldn't Catherine herself know? Like the poisoners would know, and I'm sure they would talk.
I feel like that's one of the most human things about people is that like people gossip, you know?
But I am going to reiterate very, like, just very plainly, this story, if you look it up, is very, very sad and very, very hard. And I made it a little more palatable, but it's a really difficult story to get through. I was very upset, especially in light of recent news. So I was like, do not look it up unless you want to be sad.
You know
She's a
what's
terrible
wild?
person, deserved to be on fire.
I actually have a book on this that I picked up years ago. I know exactly where it is on my bookshelf at work, and I haven't ever read it, but now I kind of want to.
Please read it at your own
Look at that,
discretion.
Karina. You're adding
Yeah.
books to Greg's list.
You're adding books. Yeah, yeah, you are. Like, God, no, I'm literally like, damn it. Now I have to like figure out where to fit that in. I'm just gonna like put off some fiction reading and just read that.
And then Greg's gonna be like, did you know about this other terrible thing that she did?
Maybe.
Honestly, her stats are pretty staggering. I was not expecting that number when you
That's a
whipped it
lot of
out.
people, for real.
It's awful. She's an awful person.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say like 250. And I thought you
Yeah.
were gonna stop there. And I was like, dang, that's a lot. And then you ended with 1,000. And I was like, wow. And I saw Randy's face too. And I was like, yeah, yeah.
She's a terrible person. Yeah. But also, like, that's a lot of, okay, she didn't do this on her own. That's the part that really upsets me is like, what about all the customers? That means that there were at least 2,500 people that were like, I'm willing to kill someone for this.
I'm sure there were repeat customers.
Oh, yeah,
Still,
probably right.
but that I don't have one instance in my life where I'm like, someone should die for this. I can't
I
think
feel
of
like
one thing
France
where
and
I'm
death
like,
is a
Really? You
weird thing.
can't think
Like,
of one thing? I can, off the top of my head,
well,
I got five.
I'm thinking of specific, like, only things I would want. Like, I'm not thinking about what would I do for the greater good of the earth. That's a whole other category of thing.
Oh, like
But
personal vendettas.
yes, I don't have anything that I personally would be like, this is worth killing.
like you're just being petty, and you're just like, you know what? I'm so mad enough that you should die.
No, I still got two.
Randy's like, I'm willing to go.
Randy. That was
Well,
really
I do
funny.
not want to be left alone in the room with Randy now. I don't know anymore.
Yeah, she's just like, I'm ready to go. Just say the word. Point at
I'm
me.
ready to go now.
This is what I will say, there would not be a paper trail.
That's
Okay?
the stupidest thing, too.
Yeah, yeah.
No, yeah, I was watching some sort of a true crime show because that's how I live my life. And it was this lady, it was like partners in crime. And the girl's partner, like the girl that actually did the murder, didn't leave any evidence. Her partner, however, wrote down in detail everything that happened, everything that went on, put it together with the weapon and hid it like in a very vulnerable, like open place in her house. And that's how they got caught. And I'm like, the disappointment. Anywho, yeah, that's my terrible story for today. It was really hard to find things. I forget, like, I do not realize because there's no history. Like, you can only find European history for the most part.
I know,
So
that's
it's,
why I'm so excited to do my story for Karina's year is 1739. And I am doing I'm doing my short story before Karina on Nader Shah. Does anyone know? Okay,
No.
absolutely crazy warrior, okay? He was Napoleon before Napoleon. In fact, there are records that show that Napoleon studied and like really admired Nader Shah. He was Persian. I'll tell you all about it next week, but I am so excited. I learned so much. I literally bought a book about it because I was like, "Oh, finally something that I have never heard before." But it was taking so much time trying to contextualize it because I had no basis for like what was going on in Persia at the time.
it is really hard to just do like small, tiny bits of history and be like, and we don't know why any of this was happening.
Yeah.
No context.
My turn.
It is your turn, Randy. I'm all done.
Okay. You are used to hearing histories of imperialism and loss from me. Today won't be completely different, but I'd like to give you a taste of something sweeter. A story to give you hope. A story of victory, however brief. To that end, we will be venturing back to New Mexico in 1680 to uncover the Pueblo Revolt. Considered the greatest and most successful rebellion of its kind, the revolt had real impact for natives and Europeans. We've been talking a lot about the British, for good reason, and the French and Dutch to some extent, but the Spanish were just as present as any of these other European immigrants. This story begins as all the other stories of colonization begin, with invasion and terror. What do we know about the Spanish invaders? Spain was the premier bastion of Catholicism in the world. In fact, the same year Columbus set sail, 1492, there was a purge of Jewish peoples from the country to promote religious uniformity. Their stated goal was the expansion of the Catholic faith and the assimilation of the native people rather than their displacement or extermination. If you heard my deep dive into Christopher Columbus, you know that the conquistadors themselves were interested in enslaving the natives, but required some rigmarole to justify it to the crown. Known as the encomienda estates, the established Spanish colonial system allowed settlers to force labor from the indigenous population. This forced labor was supposed to come with protections and instruction for the indigenous people, but in truth, it just ended up as slavery in all but name. That brutality didn't change when they made it to the Pueblo region. Before we get too far, let's clear up some of our language. Pueblo is a collective term that was imposed on the inhabitants of the southwestern United States, many of which had lived in those lands at least 5 centuries prior to invasion. Think New Mexico, Arizona, parts of Colorado, and Utah. These separate nations had established social structures, they had different languages, spiritual constructs, and were definitely distinct from one another. The science and technology, and they engaged with trade with one another. Okay, there were nomadic groups like the Apache, who, when the Spanish encountered them, they labeled as barbarians. And there were settled groups like the Hopi and Zuni, which they then grouped together and are now known as the Pueblo people, who continue to reside in their ancestral grounds to this day. Some estimates say that there were over 100 communities spread over hundreds of miles with over 100,000 individuals. While I won't talk about every group, I will identify specific nations whenever possible. Otherwise, I will use Pueblo people as a regional grouping term, knowing all it encompasses. Not to further confuse you, but Pueblo also means village, which is why it's a Spanish word for village. It is why it comes most often after nowadays when you see it, it'll be like the Zuni Pueblo or the Hopi Pueblo. It just means the place that they actually reside. So Pueblo people, the group, Pueblo by itself most commonly refers to just the villages. Okay. Now, the Spanish moved into New Mexico looking to expand their empire and search for riches in the form of precious metals and gemstones. They had settled in Mexico with a stronghold in Mexico City, but many were still looking to increase their gains by finally establishing a sailable route to the Indies. Because of this, there was an initial privately funded expedition into New Mexico in 1540. 2,000 mixed troops, both Spanish and natives from Mexico, were moved north into New Mexico. They were unprepared for the harsh conditions and were very, very hungry by the time they made it to the Zuni villages. Okay, now for some luck on the indigenous people side, the Zuni had known about the incoming troops and had moved their women, children, and elderly to a mesatop sanctuary. While the Zuni warriors tried to repel the Spanish invaders, they were outnumbered and outgunned. The weapons of the natives were no match to steel. The Spanish sat in that pueblo for months, straining the food stores of the natives. Once that was done, they would move on to the Tiwaks Pueblo. As the Spanish would have you believe, the indigenous people left their homes peacefully, taking just the clothes on their backs. Recently, though, I know, Karina, that for those of you who can't see, Karina's making a very dubious look at me. Yes. Recently in 1930, archaeological evidence suggests that a battle took place instead.
You
Doesn't
mean to
that,
tell me that they didn't just be like, hello, white stranger. Just take it. Just take it. Just
I
take
mean,
it all. Like, what
this is
logic
from a
is
group
that?
of people who were like, we're gods in this region. So it doesn't quite throw me for a loop, but to write it down like that.
And the assumption that they were like, oh, my stuff, I don't need it. This is fine.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go. Like,
This food that I've been saving for years
yeah.
to protect my family for future harsh winters, eat it.
Yeah.
Especially in this desert. Like, what?
Let your cattle have it.
What is
Because that
wrong
was
with
what they,
you?
honestly, that was one of the biggest uses of the food that they took from the pueblos. They gave it to the herds of cattle that they brought with them.
They brought
Anyway,
herds of cattle?
really awful things happened that year. I mean, really awful things happened in 1541. Suffice it to say, the Spanish don't look good in this one. Raping, pillaging, slaughtering, you get it. Throughout all of this, the Spanish didn't find any of the wealth they had been searching for. Without food and riches, there wasn't really any reason to stay. So the Spanish invaders left in 1542. With this like loss of any discovery of wealth, it would take until 1598 for the Spanish to return to New Mexico. If possible, this would be an even more brutal invasion. Pushed yet again by desires for wealth, there was additional pressure from the Franciscan priesthood to expand and establish new missions. Because of this, a single man from Spain was provided the contract to become the Captain General of New Mexico. He was granted the powers of a dictator, essentially, over that region. Yeah. Basically, they said once you get to New Mexico, do whatever you gotta do. It's gonna be fine.
That's so wild. How do you get the like, okay, what are the recommendation or prerequisites to have this kind of power? What kind of resume do you need for some guy to just look at you and be like, you see this chunk of land? Just take over, find all the good stuff. I don't care who you
You
have to
know what?
kill.
For once, I don't have an answer to that question because I did not research him. I didn't
No, but
even
you know what
name
I
him
mean? Like, who just
because I
does?
didn't even want his name to be mentioned in the
No, I
podcast.
agree.
I was
Like, you
like,
should.
it will just be known as the dictator henceforth.
I'm just trying to think of like, what do you have to do for someone to just be
hmm
like, take all of it, do whatever you have to
hmm
do. But also, that is that mentality of like money over everything else.
hmm I mean, well, what did we see in with the British? You just needed the favor of the Queen. You didn't
Yeah,
really need anything else. So
that
someone who
is true.
had the
That
favor of the
there's a lot of audacity of like, oh, we can just go here and do whatever we want,
hmm
right? Like, I feel like that's the best way to explain it.
They
hmm
just use audacity and just go.
No, like I mean, like that's a thought that I have sometimes when I read it. Like you were talking about, like people coming into like their territory. And like I've read other stuff about conquistadors, like Hernando de Soto is probably like the most notable one because he
Mhm.
does the whole like I'm a god and like I'm gonna just tell them I'm a god and then gets fucking killed, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and
And
then
good for
his
him.
men
He
are like,
deserves
we
that.
have to like hide his body and be like, oh, he just went away, and then they get like taken the fuck out. And that's
And
actually like Arkansas, Mississippi history.
and as you're gonna like as I'll mention later, not right in this section, but later on, the basically the three rules of colonization that the Spanish had were it's mine, I'm taking it, it's mine.
They use
Or
toddler
maybe
logic.
it's mine, I'm taking it, or you're giving it to me. Like those were probably the better way to describe the three.
Well, I like the turn of the phrase, like going way back to like y'all stuff when y'all were talking about Columbus and everything. You know, it's like God, glory, and gold, and not necessarily in that order, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I feel like they throw God in there to make themselves feel better. Like, we do it for the Lord.
Well, yes. And the Spanish did whatever they needed to. At least the Spanish in New Mexico. Can't speak for how it was being received in Spain, but they did whatever they needed to take utter control. So this dictator assembled more than 400 people, comprising settlers, soldiers, and a small group of about 8 friars. They also had a herd of cattle, horses, and over 80 ox-pulled carts of supplies. Kid you not. They were like they got hungry. They got hungry last time they came. We can't let that happen to us. Okay, so once he crossed over the Rio Grande, Spain took formal quotes, air quotes, ownership of New Mexico and began pressing demand upon the first community they arrived at. They continued on deeper into New Mexico region toward Santa Fe and soon found a village with two Mexican natives in residence. This provided an opportunity, so they thought. Speaking first Spanish, then a shared native Mexican language. So remember, the dictator left with Mexican natives from Mexico. So they were like, oh, let's see what they got. So first Spanish, then the Mexican natives had to find a language because it would be wild to presume that they were from the same village.
Well, apparently not because they were like, these guys will know.
Well,
It's a completely different region. That's what I
yeah,
was thinking. I'm like,
yeah,
did
yeah.
they just pick somebody from any space and they were
Well,
like,
well,
you
they
know
were
all of
still
the
from
languages.
Mexico, the Mexico. They were still
Yeah,
Mexican
they were
natives.
in Mexico versus now you're in New
Right.
Mexico.
New
Did you miss the
Mexico.
New Mexico part? You
Yeah.
moved.
I'm like, technically they're in the Pueblo because the third thing that they have to do then is then translate it into the language of the Pueblo, whatever Pueblo they were at. But it's like this intense chain of potentially 5 languages that this is going through before it's translated. So again, this opportunity is a very thin one. Um, it doesn't sound like a recipe for success. It's here that Spain's dictator believes he is brokering the utter surrender of the Pueblo people and their fealty to the Spanish crown, namely, him as Spain's representative in New Mexico. For the next few weeks, he tours around other villages who run in fear, remembering the first invasion. Like I said, they did some really horrible things until they reached the Acoma community in the fall. The large group demanded generous tribute and took food, robes, and blankets from the homes of the people. Although they moved on to the Hopi and Zuni villages, the large roving group of Spanish people were followed by about 30 odd soldiers who arrived at Acoma in the dead of winter, also demanding supplies. There were no more supplies to be given. The strained people had already given so much that they themselves were were in a point of reaching famine in the winter. And they were under tremendous pressure to like sh share warmth because they had taken a lot of the blankets. So it was not a good scenario for the Pueblo itself. And the people under pressure ended up tw killing 12 of the men that had come. The Spanish authorities could not allow this to go without consequence. The priests then declared it to be a justified war under Spanish law and condemned the Pueblo people all guilty of treason. Yeah. In 1599, yes, Karina.
Are they of treason because they didn't give them more?
Yes. Yeah. So I probably should have switched the order because in the next paragraph I'm going to tell you why they think they deserve more. But but yes, basically they're all guilty of treason because in this treaty that the Spanish dictator says that he has now brokered with the Pueblo people, they have to provide him with whatever he needs and any of his people with whatever they need. And so if you are to resist the request of supplies, then you are resisting the crown and you have now become a traitor to the crown.
I just pulled
And
something from all
and
these hoops that
the
you've made me jump through to
priests
understand that. What the
the
fuck?
the priests agree with that illogical thinking. The priests are like, yeah, fuck them. Go
Oh
get
my
him now.
God, Randy!
That's what I
No!
mean. The priests are like, the priests were the final step. They were like, this is a justified war.
They were
Go
like, we
get him.
checked with God, and he says, fuck them.
I mean, basically, yes,
Greg!
Greg. Yes. That needs to
In
be a
Greg's
sticker,
historical
Karina.
opinion, that's what God said. No.
Yeah.
I cannot understand that. But also the other thing I don't understand is this like very juvenile mentality of like, I know you have more back there and you're just not giving it to me.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
seeing these people starve and die and you're like, you give us more. We're
But
hungry
but
now.
they see them as nothing more than slaves. So why wouldn't they continue to give? They don't care what the end result is for the people living there because they're,
They
the
want to use them
mentality.
until they die
Yeah,
and then move on to the next
they're just
people.
slaves, enslaved people. They are indigenous people who have been decimated by your first round.
Well, I don't
Yeah.
like any of this.
Yeah.
Awful.
Well, we got a lot more to go, so just buckle up.
Oh, great.
So in 1599, Spanish troops reached the Acoma armed and ready to fight. Despite fighting with arrows and stones, the natives held out for 2 bloody days. In the end, over 800 people were dead, and the 500 or so left in the village were captured. The survivors would pay dearly for the pride of the Spanish. Every man over the age of 25 would see, and the accounts are a little bit varying on this, but they either had one of their legs or one of their feet chopped off. What didn't vary is that they were in fact maimed. That part was done, just not sure if it was the whole leg or how far up they went. After,
Any amount
af
isn't good, Brandy.
yeah, any amount's not great. But after that was done, they were then to spend 2 decades in servitude. The rest of the people would be enslaved. Some for the Spanish, some were given to rival native nations, some were sent down to Mexico to work. About 60 of the female children were sent to Mexico. I shudder to think what that was for. Um, and the rest of the children that remained were given to the priests. Also shudder to think what that was for. Any indigenous person not of Acoma ancestry who was there at the Pueblo when this happened had one of their hands cut off and were sent back to their homes as a warning to not resist the Spanish. There are documented sentences of mutilation happening in public at several other villages in an effort to discourage future rebellion. And this is the oppression the Pueblo people began to live under. By 1610, the Spanish had established a base in what we know as Santa Fe, and labeled the capital the Kingdom of New Mexico. They firmly established three policies of the Spanish crown. The requirimiento. I wish you could see this, Karina, because I know I'm saying this wrong, but I'm so close. Requerimiento? Requerimiento.
Now I'm like,
No?
now I don't know how to say
I
it.
think it's requerimiento.
Perfect.
Requiramento?
Requerimiento? I think yeah, I think that's the
Requerimiento.
Spanish.
Requiramento?
Basically, it's the requirements.
It's the
Yeah,
requirements, guys.
the requirements. Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
the requirements.
That is what it is in English.
Established by King Philip II of Spain, which declared that Spain came, right, in the form of their dictator and all of their other representatives with good news. But that good news came at a cost. Cost you would pay. The Spanish could demand nearly anything, and if the people resisted, they would then automatically be enslaved or killed. Your fault entirely, though. Entirely the indigenous people's fault at that point, because they read the requirements every time they would go and conquer a new nation. Didn't matter they didn't understand the language, they read them, so they were required to follow them.
Did they
The
read
second,
them, Randy? Did they?
listen, we already know they write things down that they didn't do and happened in a very different way, so who
They
knows?
probably didn't even bring the requirements with them. They were like, y'all
It's like
heard about
it
them.
feels very like a Miranda rights situation. Did we do it?
No one was around to tell, so
Right. Just say we did. The second policy was the encomienda, which we talked about already, but it provided the authority to seize utilized lands, so the lands that the indigenous people were already living on. Finally, the repartimiento allowed the Spanish to dictate land use and the expansion of the missions. The friars began to build churches and force assimilation of the natives to Catholicism. It's no surprise to those of you who are familiar with boarding schools, but their focus was on the youngest members of the villages. Between 1540 and 1680, the Spanish decimated over half of the native population. The New York Times quotes this decrease as drastic as 80,000 to 17,000 indigenous people. They had continued their cruel tradition of enslavement and amputation. It wouldn't be until 1680, 8 decades later, for another rebellion to occur, which is the rebellion we're focusing on tonight. Sorry about that. Okay, the scene has been set. For 80 years, the Pueblo people suffered at the hands of the Spanish. One of the biggest hindrances of revolution, other than language and culture, was the distance between people groups. A leader of the Tewa rose up. Born in 1630, Pope, whose name means ripe squash, was a member of the Oke Owinge community. He espoused a return to true indigenous practices. One thing you all should know here is that the indigenous, for the most part, felt very connected to the world around them and believed turning from their religions caused a severance between themselves and nature and the universe. The forced assimilation of the Franciscan priesthood stripped away their religion, sciences, medicine, and anything that connected them to their indigenous roots. This is an erasure of their very essence. If there's anything modern Americans should recognize, it is the fear and defensiveness that comes when a militant force comes to take you away. One Oke Owinge member states that assimilation is a threat to the livelihood of the people, because in Pueblo, people, thought, and culture, when religion is suppressed, the natural order of life is disrupted. For Pope, this sacrifice was too much. He worked to keep the traditions of his people alive, which endured with him in prison. Oh, sorry. For Pope, the sacrifice was too much. He worked to keep the traditions of his people alive, which ended with him imprisoned for practicing sorcery. Due to the great unrest of the Pueblo people in 1675, the Spanish authority ordered around 50 shamans arrested and brought to Santa Fe. 3 of the men were hung in various villages to prove a lesson. They really like doing this in multiple communities. They take it like on a full road show. One of the men committed suicide, and then the rest were publicly flogged and imprisoned. Brutality is really all the Spanish know. Anyway, as you can imagine, this did little to quell the unrest growing amongst the Pueblo people. A group ended up marching to Santa Fe in protest, demanding their release. The governor of Santa Fe was so caught off guard that he did end up releasing the shamans, and Pope, called Pope by some, was one of the men released. Things start moving really fast now. Representatives of the communities had been meeting, trying to devise an approach to the Spaniards. After the imprisonment, they knew the Spanish needed to leave. Pope was chosen as leader of the revolt. Remember what I mentioned earlier, that there were somewhere north of 100 distinct communities when the Spanish arrived? Pope was able to organize the remaining 45 or so different pueblos, covering a range of 200 to 400 miles, and rally a militia of over 2,000 people. That was compared to the Spanish's roughly 150 and 200 men who were separated amongst the New Mexico region.
That is so impressive to be able to get that many people to agree and come together.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it is like this is a threat to all of them.
It is, but sadly, what you see so much in history is that even when there is a shared threat, it doesn't always guarantee unity.
Right. I mean, even today, that is also an issue.
Yeah,
It
that's
is.
one of the reasons why this story is so pertinent, I think. Anyway, so comparatively to Spain and where they were at, the natives were in a much stronger position to attack, even being outarmed by their oppressors. They devised an ingenious way of ensuring everyone knew the day of the attack. So, also remembering what I told you about the nations of that area and the Pueblo people, they spoke all different languages, right? So, the way that they ensured that everyone knew the day of the attack, Pope sent out a rope with knots tied into it. Rather than rely on translations and possible miscommunications, the community would simply untie one knot each day as a countdown method of the day leading to the revolt. So, I mean, honestly, it's so crazy, especially when you note that the indigenous people were not receiving the education that they were supposed to be, right? So they were not taught to read, they weren't taught to write, they weren't taught how to ride a horse, they weren't allowed to pass on ancestral knowledge or anything really. They weren't allowed to touch a gun. Like, these were people who were really deprived of by the Spanish of anything to propel themselves and their situation forward in life, and they were still coming up with ways to fuck the Spanish over. Like, it was a brilliant workaround. According to some, August 13th, 1680 was the day that they would begin pushing the Spanish out of their homelands. Some say it was August 11th, but it's of little matter as the story goes. The Spanish captured and tortured 2 of the young indigenous runners, delivering the knotted ropes to the villages. And I say young because most often these runners that were chosen were under the age of 15. So they were tortured by the Spanish for that information. And because of this, the plan was moved up to August 10th. And so they went. While they allowed some of the villagers to flee, 400 settlers were killed in the first battle, and 21 of the 33 Franciscan missionaries in New Mexico were dead. Many of the missions were set to fire, and all survivors ended up congregating in Santa Fe. By August 13th, there were no Spanish settlements left outside of that capital. On August 15th, the indigenous people in their full power arrived at Santa Fe. Roughly 2,000 people, both Spanish and converted, were holed up inside of the Santa Fe walls. Pope's first move was to cut off water supply to the village. Indigenous accounts say that the natives sang outside the walls of Santa Fe, "The Christian God is dead, but our sun God will never die." On August 21st, the trapped invaders negotiated a truce and fled down south along the Rio Grande. There, the Spanish were humiliated. What a wonderful day. They had a tough 6-month journey ahead of them back to Juarez, where they could really think about their actions and hopefully take some time to reflect. They made a very feeble attempt at reconquest in 1682, but the Pueblo people maintained their governance, and the Spanish were turned away. Now, I would like to add here that according to the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, the Spanish accounts were that they were caught off guard and claimed that they were attacked with no explanation. They could not conceive why they were being attacked, despite the fact that they were forewarned. They were upset that the indigenous people didn't walk in to Santa Fe and declare out loud why they were planning on attacking and that they were then going to commence the attack.
Okay, but they don't even understand their
Yeah,
language. So even if they
yeah,
did come in and say, "We are here because we're tired of your bullshit," they would have been like, "Why aren't you thanking us?"
yeah. It's oppressors always wanting to play the victim, right? Like the
I just cannot.
going the audacity, right, Greg? This is going
I
back to
can't.
the audacity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're like, why would they do this to us?
And
I
then
just
they
can't
documented it. They
comprehend
were so
that.
surprised. They documented it. Yes. Yes. Pope Pope then began the task of eradicating Spanish influence from the Pueblo communities. He disavowed the Spanish language, had natives reverse baptize themselves by washing themselves in the river, and banned any Catholic religion from rituals to names. So
He
you
said,
could
"We're getting rid of it. Get
yeah.
rid of
hmm
it."
And you can't even talk about it. I better not hear that word Jesus come out of your mouth. But we know that didn't work, but it's fun to think that he tried like that. The horses were kept to trade and use. Some nations, such as the Apache, adjusted well to their introduction and began utilizing them in warfare. Much else from this time is still being uncovered archaeologically as the indigenous people return to their oral traditions, and Pope, standing 10 toes down, burned almost all of the Spanish records he could find in Santa Fe. What we do know is that the internal strife returned and the vision of a united Pueblo people didn't materialize. Famine and disease lingered, but the Pueblo people had earned themselves a reprieve from their overbearing invaders. This reprieve though it only lasted 12 years, gave the Pueblo people enough time to secure their ancient traditions, languages, and homelands. It allowed the continued endurance of the Pueblo people to this day. August 21st, 1680 was certainly not the last day of the revolution. There are a few other names for the Pueblo Revolt, one of which is the First American Revolution, one the Great Southwestern Revolt, and the other the Great Northern Revolt. What may have seemed like an isolated incident in Santa Fe set off a chain reaction of revolts as other indigenous groups rose to fight. In 1684, rebellion started popping up in El Paso, where some of the Spanish had retreated to, all the way into northern Chihuahua. Only a small number of groups remained loyal to the Spanish. Eventually, as the rebellions grew, even some of the Christian natives that had left Santa Fe with the Spanish returned to their homes to fight. By the winter of 1984, the Spanish had lost 40,000 head of cattle to the indigenous. Oh, by the winter of 1684, if I read that wrong.
I just kept thinking that scene from that movie, and I'm taking the cows too. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about? I'm
Yeah,
taking the dog
yeah,
too.
from Legally Blonde. I quote that all the time. All things, good or bad, must end. This ending came more quickly than I'm sure anyone hoped. In 1692, missionaries and Spanish officials began working on a way to take back the lands they had originally stolen. Pope had died in 1688, and the communities remained separated from one another. They had kind of reverted back to, doing their own thing, isolated from each other. It was an unfortunate set of circumstances for the Pueblo people. As a unit of soldiers, families, and friars, we know that makeup, that seems to be how they do it, made their way into Santa Fe in 1693. Taking a note from the 1680 revolt, they cut off the water to the community of Santa Fe and waited them out. By 1694, all known resistance in New Mexico was eliminated. However, some nations were never quite recolonized. For example, the Hopi people remained free of any pledge of allegiance and were far enough away to keep the Spanish from forcing the matter. The peaceful recolonization was really not all that peaceful. Again, the Spanish documenting something as being peaceful. Come to find out, the second year, the Spanish were working with a heavy hand again, and bloodshed followed as the friars pushed religious assimilation while spouting tolerance. 1696 saw a poorly planned rebellion by the indigenous people, but that was quickly defeated. The Spanish would remain in the area until Mexican independence in 1821. So what came after? Indigenous communities in the Southwest believe the lasting impact of the Pueblo Revolt to be the ability of their communities to live independently of European oppression and continue to practice all of the pieces of their culture. When the Spanish returned, at the end of the 17th century, they had a somewhat, for those of you who can't see me, it's like air quoting, it was somewhat different relationship with the Pueblo people. They weren't all the way better, but they were like, we learned something. We can't be, completely toxic. We got to give you something too. So they allowed some religious activity. They declared the Pueblos could keep their ancestral lands with large land grants. And those agreements held even after the Mexican-American War. As I said, those communities are still living on their ancestral land in the Southwest, and they retained ownership of the herds of cattle and horses. Yeah, praise. The resilient and revolutionary spirit of the Pueblo nations continue. Just as recently as 2020, the New York Times published an article entitled Why New Mexico's 1680 Pueblo Revolt is echoing in 2020 protests. During the time of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, residents in New Mexico were drawing the parallels to the surprising collaboration of communities in order to rebel against racial injustice at the hands of a governmental power. It's important we learn and remember these events as our country's history continues to be manipulated and whitewashed. We also know this rebellion wasn't in a silo. Unity was the determining factor for the success of this rebellion. Despite being starved, beaten, separated, and under-defended, the tide of war was changed with strong community. Once again, in this country's sordid history, we have to remember that tool of hope and rebellion. That's it.
Dang, Randy, that was good. I learned so much. I'm like, a lot of this is resonating with our
I
current
was watching your
time.
faces because you guys weren't talking as much as normal.
We were enthralled, Randy, and angry,
Yeah,
some
Enthralled.
of
for
us.
real.
I was mad. The whole thing made me angry.
But a little hopeful, right? Like a little
No,
hopeful.
I think especially these days, it's so hard to look at like how terrible of a situation we are in as like a country, as a world, as anything, as people with any sort of brain power. It's just hard. And is really inspiring to see people with everything stacked against them, working together against one common enemy and being like, get the fuck out of my house.
Yeah. Like
And they
like no
got him
matter
out.
what, we have to all come together to
Well, and
like fight
especially,
this kind of thing.
yes, especially after,
Yeah.
honestly, the Bad Bunny halftime show gave me a lot of hope for the country,
Me too.
genuinely. And I think that this story kind of follows that theme for the week for me. Like, it has been really hard. It is a really hard world that we are living in right now. And history is important because the stories are helping us not only see what happened, see what we can do, but also like get some hope.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can't, like, even throughout all the stuff we've talked about just this year, it's really easy to just see where it'd be easy to like give up and just drop
Mm-hmm.
out and be like, ah, fuck it, this world's a mess. I can just leave it. But
Yeah.
when other people can join in together and we may not speak the same language, we may not feel the same way about everything, but we can feel the same way about this one common enemy and like work together to kick some ass and change things. I don't know how else to say it without being like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? Why are we not doing this?
I think it's also a
Yeah.
warning too. Like it's hope. It's
But
look what you
also,
can do, but also a warning because if you think about it in terms of like, we say history is always repeating itself, always repeating itself. If we think of the civil rights movement as the first Pueblo Revolt, we're at the recolonization trying to get it back place, right? Like
I mean,
they
we're trying to, it's like we're take 5 steps forward and 800 steps back sometimes.
Right, but like we're at the second part. We're at the second at least the second fight for that, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they lost that one because they weren't ready. They weren't paying attention, which is
Well, even
crazy
when you
to
hit like
me.
a big milestone, like there's still work to be done. Like you have to keep
Yeah.
fighting that, you know?
Yeah.
I was talking with another friend the other day about like desegregation, right? We think of like Brown v. Board in 1954, right? When the
hmm
Supreme Court is like, boom, done. Schools have to desegregate. Do y'all know when one of the last schools actually desegregated? Like when
Wasn't it like 2010 or something?
2016, that was super close.
2016?
Stop.
It was
In
in
Greg, shut
Mississippi,
Alabama,
up.
in
Mississippi,
Mississippi, in a school
Mississippi.
Up
district.
I was
Mississippi.
like,
That's
I
10
read this.
years
I've
ago,
read this
though.
article. They still have a
Yes,
segregated prom.
Isn't
Do
it
they
yes,
Mississippi?
really?
that's
Yeah.
10 fucking years ago. Mississippi, yeah.
hmm
Mississippi is embarrassing,
hmm
but not surprising.
But like, if you read like news reports about it, they're like one of the last schools, and you're like, what others?
Yeah, why
hmm
are we still
Yeah.
doing this? And also, why are you still allowed to do this?
I mean, I live in Little Rock, right? I mean, Karina, like that's the center of like, the Little Rock Nine and integration, and people think that's in the past. And it's like, no, there's schools like not even that long ago that were still segregated.
hmm
That's crazy to me, Greg, because you said 10 years ago, and my son is about to be 8.
Oh
Yeah.
You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like,
hmm He was
How?
probably still, there was probably still a segregated school when he was born.
Oh,
That's so
Yeah.
100%, because
crazy.
apparently that one was one of them.
Yeah.
One of. Yeah, yeah,
Can't get
yeah.
over that one. I have a lot of feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a lot of feelings about it too, to be honest with you. The only thing that the only people in this whole story that I was like, yeah, okay, I kind of get what you're doing was the indigenous people who had converted to Catholicism and then left.
Yeah, I could do that.
Yeah.
That made the most sense to me as to be a reason to turn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Knowing how they were about religion, knowing how they used it as a connection
Hmm.
tool, knowing what it probably took to get them there in the first place, that sort of like cognitive dissonance that it would have taken, you know, if they were religious in the first place. I'm not going to say that everyone
Hmm.
in their community was like a diehard, but it
I know,
those are
what's
the
his name?
only ones that I was like, yeah, I get it. They would have stayed in the Pueblo. They would have left with the Spanish. Like, of course they would. Of course. Everyone else, fuck them. What are you doing? What are you actually doing? You're just fighting because you don't like some inner tribal issue. I hate that I said it that way, but I don't really know another way to say it.
Yeah, like what is your reason not to fight against the Spanish?
Yeah.
Well, no,
I want to
they
know.
want to fight each other. Like some of the ones that they picked up along the way just didn't like the Pueblo people, and they were like, "Let's go fight with you." Yes.
And so they were like, I just really don't like them.
Yeah.
I'll go with
Well,
you.
or like there had been animosity for generations, I'm sure. I'm sure it wasn't, well, I would hope it wasn't a spur of the moment decision.
Randy, thank you so much for that. I loved it. And also, I want to visit Santa Fe. I've never been there. And
No,
now I'm
you're
even more
joshing
inspired to
me.
go.
When
Huh?
I
I
was
wrote
looking
about
at
that,
the I was looking at ruins for like because I remember reading like books as a kid and like what places, but like Mesa Verde in Colorado is like a national park. Now I'm like I want to go there. Like that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Just sort of like put yourself in that place and like imagine people living there and thinking those things about like we have to drive these people out.
hmm
Wild.
and then just actually doing it and sending people
Hmm.
out with just the clothes they have on their body and
Well,
being
Randy,
like,
that
that's
was
good
all that
enough.
was left. They ate everything else. They took the
Yeah.
blankets.
Yeah.
They fed them to the cows. Like what? That's the part that pisses me off about most of these stories is they have no idea how to conserve any resources. They just use and abuse everything, and then they're like, why isn't there any left?
Well, that no, the first invasion, the one in 1540, that's what they did. They basically decimated a whole group of people. I already closed my notes, so I can't remember which people group it was, but they decimated the whole group of people. They were like, what do we do? What do we do? Because they just ate willy-nilly. They were like, whatever we want, we'll have. In in the desert. Like when
That's
I'm thinking
Coronado,
about,
right?
say that again?
Is it Coronado who was
Yes.
the
Mm-hmm.
explorer?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like I've read like little bits of his like the stuff from that period, and it is like just stumbling in the dark, like just sort of
Mm-hmm.
like I have no idea, but like wherever I go, I just assume I can take whatever I want.
But
Mm-mm.
it's a desert.
Yeah, I understand the first time not understanding conservation, any having any sort of forethought or like thinking, rubbing two brain cells together so that you can get one thought and be like, don't eat everything, you dumb bitch. And yet they come back and they're like, again, we just find more people to do it to. It's stupid. And they just keep doing it. I just don't understand. I'll never
It's the
understand. And you
only
know
way,
what?
I
Good.
mean, it's the only way something like that can live, though. It's hungry all the time. A machine, a colonization machine is hungry all the time. Hungry for land, hungry for food, hungry for people.
Well, that was traumatic for all of us, Randy. Thank you. Well,
Christina, was it traumatic for you?
I'm still processing.
Okay, so that's a yes.
Yes.
I will be going to Santa Fe one day, and I'll take pictures and be like,
Sign me
I
up.
would
I'll
fight
go
for
with
this.
you.
Yeah, we should go. It'd be nice. But yeah, lots of really traumatic stories today, actually. But I'm so glad that you gave us a good one, Randy. I mean, it got sad again, but like it is very hopeful, and I do like that. And what I liked about my story was that there were consequences. I love that. I
Yeah,
think there should
both
be
of them are
consequences.
really good. I appreciate y'all dropping that on us because
And I liked moving away from the East Coast historically.
There were a lot of interesting connections, though. It's like sorcerers, like in both cases, you know?
It was good. It was good. I'm so glad. Thank you, Randy. I really loved your story. I thought it was good.
I'm glad.
Enthralling. I think it's time to go before we get sadder, happier, sad, cry, whatever. Again. Anyway, but thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Sip and Saga Society. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to support our historical endeavors, please visit our website at sipandsaga.online, where we also have merch. Finally, it only took forever. And we also have membership availabilities, membership opportunities. That one sounds better. But thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time with an equally very horrible story about another revolution or rebellion. That's the word I meant. There were a lot of similarities to this one, Randy, but it
I
ends
told
sad.
you, there's a lot of synergy happening this month in our stories.
Unintentionally, because I barely know what's happening. I just show up and I'm like, this is what I'm talking about.
And I almost
Wait,
didn't choose
is
this year. I
1739
almost
Stono? Is that what you're
Yeah,
doing? Okay, yeah, I gotcha.
it's terrible.
It is. I agree.
All right, well, bye now. Come back for more
Bye.
terrible things.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.